What's music? Mike and Marty on the feed. Mike and Marty. Mike and Marty.
Good morning, Rockingham, and welcome to the feed. We're back. We missed a week. We had
technical difficulties.
yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Technical difficulties. It's November 3rd. Hard to believe it's already November. We missed Day of the Dead, but we made it through Day of the Dead, so that's good.
That's a good thing.
Today we have Guy Payne with us. He's going to be talking to us about sustainable housing and a sustainable housing tour that's coming here this month in just about 10 days.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But first, Marty, with local events.
So this past weekend was the BIFTA. Oh, okay. Let's go again. Just talk about technical difficulties. This past weekend was the BIFTA and co-sponsored BIFTA, Greater Falls Chamber of Commerce, and Flatiron, 6th annual chili and chowder cook-off. I just wanted to give a shout out to the winners. So in the chowder category, the first place winner was Jamaican Jewels. Second place was Bellas Falls Rotary. Yay. Go Rotary. Third place was Green Mountain Traffic Control. And actually for the Rotary Club, all the credit goes to Rick Kavatsky because he was busily preparing the chili for the chowder for days. He was fishing for days. The chili winners were the Threaded Trunk. Bella, the cat at Village Square Booksellers, had a very unique chili that she made herself. And then the third place was Alyssa's Amazing Chili. I'm not quite sure who Alyssa was, but Alyssa's Amazing Chili. So at the Bellas Falls Opera House this weekend, it's Venom with a subtext of Let There Be Carnage.
Yes. And if you've seen the previews, you know.
I'm just saying, okay, that kind of turned me off to that.
Well.
But on the flip side, Classic Wednesday, which is tonight, is The Goonies. It's sponsored by Savings Bank of Walpole, and it's actually it's a free admission movie.
Yeah.
The sponsors
really
can choose to do that. So.
Used to watch that with my kids all the time. That was really
so that's this weekend.
Entertaining.
And coming up, we have an exciting, speaking of Rotary, we have an exciting event happening. We lost our major fundraiser of doing the spaghetti dinner and the penny sale. The penny sale was just a lot of work, and a lot of drain on the community for asking for prizes. So we threw some ideas around and we came up with the idea of the Bellows Follies. It's going to be a Broadway cabaret and live auction. It's happening Thursday, November 18th at 7:30 p.m. at the Bells Falls Opera House. Nice. So David Stern and his new company, Wild Goose Players, will be providing the music and the entertainment. We have just a few live auction items, not so many that people are going to get bored with the auction and miss the singing. And it's co-sponsored by the Bells Falls Rotary and Wild Goose Players. And the cool thing is the ticket prices vary. Tickets are as low as $10, or you can go as much as $40 if you want to have the premium seats. All tickets are available for purchase at the BellowsFallsOperaHouse.com website, which is now live and working able to accept credit cards.
Yeah.
And there's a seating chart, so it's not general admission. It's you actually choose the seat that you want and you purchase it. You can wait till the night of the event and purchase tickets at the door, but I would really recommend that people, for all kinds of levels, contactless purchase and all of that type stuff, ease of getting in, just purchase your tickets ahead of time by going to the BellowsFallsOperaHouse.com.
Yeah, they've really come along with the whole seating and everything. It's really getting very professional.
Yep.
I wonder who those people are.
I wonder who those people are. It was Charlie Hunter and the crew at the Opera House. They've been working tirelessly, and the town hall, because they had a bit of a glitch with the interface of the town hall, like credit card ability, and the site. The site is Spectrix. That's the site that the town hall that the Opera House is using. So they had to work to get that. To get the kinks worked out, as is always the case when you work for that type of stuff.
I mean, that's just the way it is now. Any hints on who's singing and who's dancing? And
so the Wild Goose Players are pretty much made up of the general cast that David has had before in the musicals that he's done. So you'll see a lot of familiar faces doing and some amazing voices.
Oh,
so it should be a fun night. We're hoping that it will evolve into
regular thing.
regular
like
yearly
this time of
event,
year
yeah.
Before Thanksgiving, because it is
Yeah.
a nice time to go to a show
It
and
is.
see things. How about the auction items? Is it going to be like huge things like a car? or
Well,
is it
no,
gonna be
there's
like
a couple of
dinner tickets or gift
the
certificates?
two auction items that I know of are a weekend getaway on the Cape,
Whoa.
and I believe it's also a weekend getaway at a condo in Lake Tahoe.
Holy
I think.
cow.
I think.
Those are
Don't
big.
quote me on these because I obviously hadn't
Yeah.
done my homework for Mike's questions this morning,
Okay.
but I believe those are the two.
Just
bigger
so it's not
auction
like a
items.
weekend on Miners Pond.
I
or-
think it's a weekend at Brockway's Mills at the Smith
That
House.
would be
I'm pretty
nice.
sure that's exactly what that was the top build thing was.
Lake Tahoe, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Good prizes.
So I think, but
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't quote me on that because
All
I
right.
wouldn't want to disappoint
We won't.
anybody. But I'll try to find out. I'll find out
Yeah.
for next week for sure.
That's good.
That'll be a
Well,
task.
Guy, thank you for coming.
Thanks for inviting me back again.
I know this is probably we were trying to figure out how long we've
Yeah,
been doing
this
this,
is
and
like
you've
the-
come every year to promote.
Right around this time.
Just, actually, it's been earlier.
Oh.
Because they were tours that we did in which people physically went to the homes.
Okay.
Remember back in the day when we could do that?
Yeah,
I know.
2
People
years
don't want
ago?
us to do that anymore. You know?
Can't understand why.
So last year we decided, well, let's do it virtually.
Okay.
And because of with all the technical things that none of us had experience with,
Right.
Yeah.
we said, let's go to November, not
Yeah, yeah.
not
yeah.
October. So this is the second year, and I think we're still at that point. I think we'll probably remain a virtual tour.
Interesting. How did it go last year? Like how was the attendance and what was
It was
the
great.
feedback? Good.
And the quality of the production was great. People had questions, and the nice thing was it was such that we had a house over in Manchester. We didn't have to worry about the weather.
Right.
We didn't have to worry about people saying, "You mean I got to clean my house up to have folks come through?" So we probably doubled the number of people that actually attended
Oh,
Wow.
great.
Neat.
in the past. And when you have people coming through, we saw there was almost a maximum of maybe 50 that
Yeah.
could come
Like in a-
through at a time and spend time with a contractor. Here, it was an ongoing tour. And then they could go onto our website and
And
see
get
the
even
tour
more,
and see
yeah.
the tour again. So
Oh,
it-
nice.
So
Yeah.
so it will be on our website till next year.
So
Yeah.
kind of the silver lining
Yeah.
in the
It really
in the,
was.
in the bad thing that COVID was, it created a better platform for you all.
It really did. But it created one of the biggest challenges, and you probably did it with when you were doing your filming, is that there was the level of detail that's required. Builders were up to their eyeballs in work, and I got to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let me
Exactly.
just make a video.
It's not. Just
It
making-
doesn't
no one,
work.
not many people understand that.
How hard can that be?
That's right.
Yeah, it's a couple
Then you get
minutes.
the ums and and the facial expressions. So, we had to work through a lot of that.
Yes, yeah.
And you had, Teresa Spear was here maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And she's our program manager, and, that stuff drives her nuts.
Wow.
'Cause she's.
But we do have to step back, just
Yes.
because we have to
Yep.
find out
Who is this?
Who are you?
Who are
What
you
is
talking
this?
to?
Because we're talking about the Sustainable Energy Outreach Network called
Right.
SEON,
SEON. Yep.
which most people know what it is, but I was.
Oh, I had to look it up again
It's
this
a
year.
tongue twister. It's a tongue twister. It just doesn't
Yes.
roll off.
It does not roll off your
And
tongue.
I still do it now and then.
So what is SEON?
SEON is a 501c3 nonprofit that is committed to enhancing the knowledge and skill level of contractors and architects
Right.
to move into what we would call high performance buildings. Those are buildings that, one, naturally are committed to energy efficiency. But if you don't give equal intensity to water and vapor management, you have problems. And I think everybody is becoming aware of that. But then it's also indoor air quality, health, safety features. Are you selecting products that actually absorb carbon? Because you want a house to be a carbon sink.
Yeah.
And the whole issue of embodied energy, how much energy is being put into a product before it's for sale. So it's So those are the, sort of the main categories of what we call high-performance homes. Now, not all homes are going to go there. You know,
Right.
we talk about cost and all, and so sometimes we use the phrase "a pretty good house."
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's,
And
Yeah.
for many people, that's sort of where they are.
yeah. The compromise is how you make progress, though, right? You can't. It's
Sure.
sort of like we used to be different too. You know. Yeah. So it's the incremental changes.
Yeah.
And so a pretty good house gets to be maybe a better house, and then
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, but still keeping their eye on what are some of those criteria. And then the other is how do we engage the community to be as fossil-free as possible. So this tour that we have, which will be virtual on November 13th,
Okay.
really combines both. We're featuring the builders who have made this kind of commitment, whether it's a new house, an addition, or what we call a deep energy retrofit. But for many people, it means you're going down to the actual studs.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's just not blowing in insulation. But you can blow in the insulation. But when we use the phrase deep energy retrofit, you're going right down to the sheathing.
Wow.
And so it's featuring those builders. And the real challenge in Vermont, and probably in most of the northern states, there's a branch of physics now called building science,
Oh.
which is, you're talking physics, so we're talking about a new level of learning for a lot of the contractors. But in a most fundamental way, how does air, heat, and moisture move through a building?
Wow.
And far too many contractors do not know this.
Oh yeah.
And so what our commitment was when we formed after Hurricane Irene was to make sure that as many contractors, architects, learned this stuff ahead of time. Peter Yost, who's a key consultant that we use, oftentimes will make presentations to architectural firms or universities, and they say, well, we don't really teach that because you'll learn it on the job.
There's the chicken and egg problem
That's
there. Yes.
that's right, and so far,
Yeah.
I don't want to label architects with that, but you want to make sure that they are using the most best practices as it pertains to building science. But it's really the challenge of getting your carpenters, your designers, all on board
Right.
with the building science.
Because it is, and I don't want to say categorize carpenters either, but it tends to be one of those things you do because your dad was a carpenter,
That's right.
and you knew a carpenter and you liked being a carpenter, and so it's not necessarily a science. People, I don't think people think of it as a science-oriented field, but
Yeah.
it really has to be.
It is now,
Yeah.
because you're employing thermodynamics, you're employing physics. I mean, not thermodynamics that I studied at one point in time, but it's still those dynamics that are
Yeah.
in place in a house all the time.
So to go back a little bit to one of the first things you said, and see if I interpreted this correctly, I think when people were talking about energy efficient houses at one point, it was make them as tight as possible.
Right.
And that's not the case anymore because you said that you would run into problems. But I think the general consensus was make this house super energy efficient, super tight, all the heat will stay in it, but then what happens?
Well, if you don't, it's insulate it, but ventilate it right. So what we're doing is how do you make sure that there is actual ventilation in the home while you're making it tight. But if all you're doing is making it tight and your water vapor is still in your house, then you get rotting sills.
Yeah.
Then you get the house composts.
Yeah.
And you're going to find a lot of people that they don't realize that can happen, but next thing you know, within 5 years, you begin discovering.
Do you get mold also? Or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. So it's mold, decomposition, all of that can occur. But there are mechanical systems now that are in place that will help you do the ventilation. So that's all part of any well-constructed home now.
Have you found in the years since you've been doing this, have you seen like big changes to technology, or has it been gradual changes to technology?
Sort of intermittent. I think probably the biggest change for a lot of people has been the development of two things. One is the cold climate heat pumps. So that didn't really exist about 5 years ago. That is now fairly common for a lot of homes. The biggest challenge in using an air source heat pump, and it's like, well, how do they work? Well, it's sort of magic. The biggest problem for people with air source heat pumps is they will immediately jump to, well, that's non-fossil product. But if they haven't insulated their house, if they haven't done the air sealing, then many of them are coming away and saying, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you need to do certain things first. And the other is probably heat pump water heaters. We're seeing more and more of those, where now you're using, you're not using fossil fuel. And some new ones that are coming out, Sandon is I'm not sure whether it's the compressor, but the unit uses carbon dioxide rather than refrigerants.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so one of the concerns with the heat pump water heaters is if you have it in the basement, it will use a lot of your cold air in turning it into a heating system, but then it makes the basement colder. So now with the Sandon product, it's a CO2 refrigerant, or not a refrigerant, it's a CO2 gas, but that can be outside.
Oh, interesting.
So, so if you're asking that, and I suppose you can also begin throwing in now the amount of solar that is going on. I remember on our first website, we had Harlow's solar. Like that was the big deal.
Yeah, right.
And now they're everywhere.
And now, and now, I mean, the wonderful thing about Rockingham, the state identifies a sheer amount of solar arrays that are needed by 2050. We're almost, and then it's like, how much do you have by 25, by 30, and then maybe jumps to 50. We're about 80% there.
Wow, that's good to know. Yeah.
Because of some of the solar arrays that are out on 103, one that will be going up in back of the
old state police.
The old state police. The town still thinks, well, we're really going to use that property industrially at some point.
To produce solar energy. That's anyway.
So I think.
But tell us about.
And let me just sort of jump to one thing, because I know Laurel will cream me if I don't say this. I think one of the other bigger things that is coming is the realization that regenerative agriculture is going to play in the global warming. And so that whole piece in terms of earth-based, that vegetation, in terms of the way in which we live our lives, that's going to be a whole new dimension that.
So can you explain for the novice a little bit more what regenerative
agriculture?
agriculture?
Mainly, it's the ways in which we farm or even use our vegetable gardens, because it is the quality of the soil and the plants that are absorbing the carbon that holds it for years. You've seen cornfields that get cut down and remain brown all wintertime. Well, you're losing all that carbon. Now if you begin crossing the river down in Westminster, you may begin seeing that field covered with grass now, or buckwheat or whatever they're using.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So it's really looking at the quality of the soil, how it's being used in terms of crop rotation or livestock rotation. David Major, I don't know how long he keeps his sheep in one section and then moves to another, and the quality of yield of that soil now is tremendous. Has increased. So that's a whole new way of living now that is, in many respects, people are seeing as absolutely essential to the climate change And yet we didn't hear that in Glasgow.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, not just climate change, but, I mean, we've definitely seen from COVID, you know, shortages in sourcing things like food
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So to be most sustainable, I know this is a big push Laurel has, sustainability. People having their own gardens, even just having their own gardens and growing their own vegetables and going back to canning those vegetables or freezing vegetables so that you don't rely on the food chain and the trucking and you know, industry as much.
Absolutely, yep.
So
And
speaking of,
you may recall, we were running out of canning lids last year.
we were, yeah, you couldn't get them.
We couldn't get them.
Yeah, I had them all. I was doing all the canning.
Right for your potlucks. that you-
Right before my potluck, and then I was baking too, so, you know, all those things. Inside joke, Marty does not like to really do that type stuff, but anyway. So speaking of Laurel, tell us about her house.
Yeah.
Well, can we sort of back it up a little bit?
Yeah,
I'm not sure if we really talked about
The tour yet.
Yeah.
That's what
Tour.
You came on to talk about the tour. And so I
5
think we need
minutes.
to, that's a good place to, we talk
Yeah,
about
'cause
the
we
tour
got
and we can get
5
the-
minutes left.
All right, all right.
Okay.
Okay. On November 13th, SEON is putting on our 6th virtual, now sustainable home tour. And you can register for that by what's right on the screen now, seon.info/home tour. And what it is a virtual tour this year of 3 homes. Really unique homes in that one is a hempcrete,
Wow, neat.
where they're using hemp and lime above the ground as their main source of the foundation. Not the foundation, but
But
the
the
walls.
structural wall.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a whole hempcrete. That is hempcrete, and again, hemp being carbon absorbing, and then they use the lime. So you'll learn about this hempcrete house that's based in Goshen, Massachusetts.
Oh.
There's another home called the Cliff House. Is a small home that they were going to renovate a garage, and it just didn't fit the design. So it's for a single mom and her 3 kids, and it's a simple, elegant, right in the, not in the heart, but right in Norwich. So again, keeping it local. And then we have Laurel Green and Steve Crother's home right on Brown Street in Bellows Falls. And it was really a rundown house. Water came off the roof, went through cracks in the foundation, left a delta of mud in the basement. There was no functional
Yeah.
heating system, broken windows, no way of managing the moisture. But for Laurel and Steve, there was southern exposure to the house. So that meant, or southern and western, to the house, and that was enough for Laurel because she knew how she could maximize her garden use. She was, you know, a farmer but before. And it was in town, and wanted to make sure that their lifestyle was such that they could ride the rails, walk downtown, and yes, they do have an electric car, but they minimize the amount of travel that they do. So they purchased this home. They lived outside of the home for, I don't know, a year and a half to 2 years, in an apartment. And Steve and Laurel were the general contractors. And the transformation that they're slowly bringing to this home is tremendous. They first had to focus on the basement. The whole foundation was redone. They eliminated the basement windows and then put water-resistant barriers on the ground floor, and then closed foamed up part of the wall, because in older homes, as much as we would not want to use foam, there's really no other product. So they foamed, I don't know how many feet up. And you'll see pictures of this if you go
Yeah.
in. And then they also put in the basement, a heat pump water heater, as well as a ventilation system. And they did a lot of the ductwork.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll have to see this online.
Yeah, I mean, it's really extraordinary. And then you begin seeing, they put in what's known as an underground roof, which is you dig down a certain, I don't know, 10 inches or so, and then you have a fabric that you first attach to the house and then slowly lead it away from,
Oh, so the water
so
goes
to
away
the
from
building,
the
so the
house.
water comes off the roof and then flows away from
Away.
the house.
Yeah.
And most homes do not have
Of
that.
course not. No.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But you can hand dig that yourself. You don't
Yeah.
need a backhoe to go in and do that.
Yeah.
So they put in an underground roof, and remember that 5-inch torrential rainfall we had this summer?
Mm-hmm.
Their basement was dry.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
A story of success.
So I think we're probably almost out of time, would be my guesstimate. Yes, that's a big yes from
Colin's
Colin.
shaking his head
So-
vigorously up and down. All right. So, Guy, thank you again.
you.
You're welcome.
The time flies when you come on here.
does.
You're such a great guest. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again. And
And we'll see you next week
yeah,
on
you're
the
the
feed.
fountain of
On the
information.
feed, yeah, I'll be the MC.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Bye.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and